with just having our design up here. One thing that I forgot to mention on the last video that hopefully you guys all did is to measure from the left side 11 inches long and make a mark at the top and bottom of your car body, because the car body is only 11 inches long, where our paper was also 11 inches long. The folder's a little bit longer. Some of you may have already cut your folder into two pieces because it is a little easier to put on the overhead when it is in two pieces. Remember, when you do your design and you put your design on, you're going to want to flip this over on the overhead and put your design under it so that your design doesn't end up on the side with the dotted lines. We want the dotted lines to be hidden and on the bottom of the car. When you cut this apart, please try to do a nice, neat job. If you end up with jagged lines or crooked lines, it's going to affect the way that it floats across the floor. Remember, this is that 11-inch mark right here that we forgot in the first video. You're going to want to cut that also. Remember that the solid lines are the cut lines and the dotted lines are the fold lines. So on the back of the car here, those 3-inch lines we drew, they're solid, so I want to go ahead and cut those. And then I'll just set this piece aside. Okay, remember, it's easier to get your design on it first before you do all the cutting and that sort of thing. The fins are pretty self-explanatory. All right, if you drew the design on either side of the fins, you'll probably be okay. But remember, we set the fins up opposite of each other because they both face the outside. Sometimes people put the design on the wrong side of their fins, so you can only see the design on one fin. So you'll want to make sure that you get the designs on the proper side of your fins so you can see them both. We used to have a bucket of scissors with like 15 pairs. The bucket disappeared. Now I think I have 2 pairs of scissors, so we can probably borrow a few from the shop, but if you have your own scissors, that would also be helpful. So the air scoop right here, if you've had problems laying this out, don't be afraid to ask. It is a little bit more confusing as it's more of a trapezoid shape instead of just a regular square or rectangle. All right, so there's all the pieces cut out. Now, what did we say the dotted lines were? Yeah, those are the fold lines, and we want all of our lines to be pretty nice and square and straight. Remember, the more you fold them and the more wobbly they get, the paper kind of loses its rigidity. That usually makes the car not work as well. What I like to do is take a ruler and set it on that dotted line. And get a nice fold in there like that. I don't really fold it back and forth a bunch right now because that'll make it more wobbly, okay? If I can do it with just folding it once or maybe twice, then that's what I want, because I want the paper to be as rigid as possible still. So the ruler really kind of helps with that straight line and everything. The air scoop here, it's got to fit inside of the car body. So you might want to fold it just a little bit smaller than you did the car body, okay? So I think when I folded the car body, I kind of set it up so I could see the lines just a little bit on the fold. I'm actually going to set my ruler a little bit over the line, not much, but just enough to hide that dotted line when I make my fold, so that this ends up maybe just a little bit smaller and it fits inside the car. You don't want this to end up making your car push clear out, okay? That's a pretty good fit. Notice the short end, the small end, is going to go towards the front of the car. Can you guys see how that pops up in the back a little bit? This is the short side, this is the tall side, okay? From here, it's pretty simple. We're going to get everything glued together. One thing I want to do is use this scratch awl to poke a hole for where we're going to stick this tack through, all right? And usually I say somewhere in the middle here. You don't obviously want to poke it through the air scoop. You don't want it clear back here at the back end. So somewhere in the middle. And we can use a block of wood. Poke a little hole. A lot of times I like to reinforce it then with a piece of tape and poke it one more time. Sometimes we do tape on top and bottom just so it doesn't rip out, all right? So you'll see what that's for in just a minute, but it's kind of easier to get that hole poked before you get all the fins and everything on there. We also had a fold line here. It's kind of hard to see with the light. See it there? So I want to, that's going to fold down just a little bit. And again, I want that to be a little bit of a sharp fold, but it doesn't have to be all the way down 90 degrees. It's just going to come down a little bit later on. Okay, so there's that fold line. Next, I've got my hot glue gun. I'm going to put everything together. You want to use enough glue, but not so much that it's drowning your part. You have to work kind of quickly when you use the hot glue, and you also need to be careful not to burn yourself, okay, which does happen. I'm going to put a little bit on this side, a little bit on this side. Remember, you're going to have to work kind of quickly. I'm going to spread that apart and get that where it goes. You're going to have to be careful not to stick it to the wrong place. Try to firm that up and get that together. Guys, if you mess up on the hot glue, it's a bad deal, because usually it tears your car apart then when you go to try to fix it. So you want to really make sure that you get that in there right, and if you need help from somebody, maybe get some help. So you can see how that's all the way up tight, and there's space down there, and then the back part comes out almost even with the car. Can you guys see that okay? All right. So the fins are also a little bit tricky, okay? The fins, you can either glue them inside the tab that you cut or outside the tab that you cut. I really don't think there's that big of a difference, but some people, they glue them outside so you can see their design a little bit better, okay? So that's up to you. I'll go ahead and glue mine on one at a time. A little bit of glue on the fin. And once again here, you want to try to be pretty precise when you put this together. Get everything lined up well. So there's one fin, do the other one. And again, make sure you get the proper fin on the proper side so you can see your design. So if you're working on your design, you might want to think about how they're going to fit on your car. The hot glue can also be messy if you kind of stick it and move it around. You know how it gets stringy and pulls out like the spider web looking things. So you want to try to keep that nice and neat. The last part that's a little bit tricky is gluing the ramp down. We want this to be about even with the bottom of the car in most cases. So what I want to do is set it up and kind of tack glue it down onto each side. You don't want a bunch of extra glue sticking out. Sometimes it's nice to have an extra hand for this part also. And a lot of times I don't put a whole lot of glue on this part until I launch it a few times, because everybody's cars are a little bit different to where you might want to move that up or down, okay? But when you are ready to reinforce it, just put a nice bead of glue right between where you curved that down and the bottom of your car. And that should be pretty good to get you started. You'll notice these are a little bit wobbly. That's not a really huge deal. We can put a little more glue in there if we need to. Okay, but I've got the back ramp curved down towards the bottom of the car. And all my gluing is done. The last step then is to put this little brass tack in here for what the rubber band's going to hook onto. So I've got that hole that I already made and reinforced, and I want to punch that through, and you want it sticking out far enough that we can hook our big rubber band around it, but not so far that it's going to be wobbling all over the place like that either, okay? You want the rubber band to be able to hook around there, but also the rubber band to release. So if it's too tight, it's going to get stuck on the rubber band. If it's too loose, it's probably going to bend and not work very well. So once I put that through, I'm going to bend the top over. And again, then usually I like to reinforce this with a couple pieces of tape to keep it from moving. Okay, so there's your construction. That should give you plenty to work on for probably today and some of you tomorrow. All right.